And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names. We have the big fun.
Hello.
How you going tonight, Meighan? How you going today?
Hello, Jeff. Good to see you. I'm so disappointed that I can't work out how to put a background on.
I just thought you had really great taste in like feature walls.
Yeah, it's a green feature wall. So 2021 in the Zoom era, but no, normally I have something really interesting like, the toilet house in Korea or the skate house in Malibu. I like to have really interesting houses behind me, but not tonight, just mine.
Not tonight. Not tonight. A nice green wall. That's what it's all about.
Oh, thank you.
So Joe, how are you going today? How's your day been, man?
Mate, my day's been fantastic. I've been super excited about this one, this live chat. Meighan's been a buyer's agent for a very, very long time. Before it was cool. What I like about this one, what I'm excited about this one, and I'm even jumping ahead, is that you built the industry. Like you've helped form this buyer's agent industry, which is now somewhat more commonplace. But how are you, Jeff, mate? How's your day been, most importantly?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reflecting on the day, and I'm not really it was a fantastic day. Like every day is really weather was great. Sydney is, South Coast is beautiful. I kind of wish I was at the beach, but that's okay. I did have to do something.
Don't we all?
Yeah, come to Cronulla. You'll both love it here.
I don't know, man. Wollongong is the place for you. Don't worry about Cronulla, mate. Let's not. And I'm sure the Gold Coast or Queensland is the place for me, actually.
Oh, look, I'm a bit of a cold frog, so I can't go. I lived in Newcastle when I did my first degree, and oh God, I remember surfing in 5 mil wetsuits in winter, and just thinking, God, It's got to be something better than this.
Wow, Newcastle.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly.
Yeah, Newcastle is a fun part of the world. It is, yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, let's do the quote of the week, Joe, before we kind of kick off the really good stuff and the fantastic things that we've got coming away. And we do have an announcement, so check out, stay to the end, and there will be some fireworks going off. So, and for your comments, thoughts, any kind of things as well. Joe's going to announce he's on Australia's Next Top Model next. So that was the thing that I teased him about today. So, but Meighan,
wasn't there a recent announcement around the next Bachelorette or something?
There I am.
That was going to be the joke, but I thought I probably shouldn't say that because Joe. I mean, I don't know if Kat watches the show, but
there might be a few questions
after. Yeah. A little bit married. Slightly married? Is there just a degrees of marriage?
Oh, geez.
Sorry.
What's your quote of the week, Meighan? What is your quote of the week?
The one that I really love is you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's the big thing that led, my partner in crime, Veronica Morgan, and I to actually come up with what we've come up with. But it's something that I live and breathe every day. And it really means that you can't know everything, but you can know how to have your mind open to hearing things, and then knowing how to go and get the answers that are reliable and, give you the right direction. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a really valuable one to always live by. Property is a big one. Yeah.
I love it.
100%. And it's so true. You don't know what you don't know, but it's also trying to find the right people in the right places that you can actually trust and rely on. Especially in this industry, it's
so much so. Yeah, because often you're looking for the quick and easy answer, and property just isn't quick and easy. It's long term and it's hard yakka, and it's a lot of research, and we're going to talk about a lot of that tonight. But it's the easy answer is probably fraught with danger and probably going to point you in the wrong direction and give you heartache and loss long term. Yeah. So what you don't know, but you can learn it.
Yeah. It's got high buying price. I like that. Anyway, I'm rambling. Jeff, what is your quote of the week? What is yours?
Henry Ford, whether you think you can or can't, you're right. Done. That's my quote. So it's kind of, it pays to the old mindset kind of thing of preparing yourself to be to get an optimal result. You actually kind of need to think, well, here's what I'm going to achieve, and I absolutely have confidence and belief in whether that be my team or whether that be in my own kind of research, that I'm going to be able to execute this strategy that I've chosen for myself. So I think that's apt for this conversation. So that's my quote of the week. On to you, Joe.
Love
I'm going to hand it all to you, mate.
I'm all for it, mate. I do like a bit of Henry Ford. My one's coming from someone who doesn't have a first name, because no one knows her first name. Her name is J.K. Rowling. So whatever the J and whatever the K means.
Josephine, isn't it?
You could never, if someone said Josephine Rowling, I would never know. You would have to say J.K. Rowling.
Oh my God, I've got to Google it now. Because
Rowling.
my oldest son is knee deep in the books at the moment, and every night is, we're going through one of the books, reading the books. What does it stand for?
See, well, no one knows what her first name is. So for me, I was listening to one of those commencement speeches that people do at university.
Joanne.
Yeah,
Joanne.
It is. I looked it up. Yep.
Joanne. And what's the K?
You don't know what you don't know. There you know. Now we know. Thank you, Google.
Thank you, Google. Mine is she was doing this commencement speech, and she was talking about how, how she had a very hard upbringing and a hard go at life. To start with, she was the poor of poor, and she said this. She said, "There's an expiry date on blaming your parents for steering you in the wrong direction," and I really like that. That resonated. That resonated with me. It's a bit harsh. It's not the reality that what a lot of people want to hear. But I'll say it again. There is an expiry date on blaming your parents for steering you in the wrong direction. If I don't know. Does that sit? Is that just me, or is?
No, I think it's amazing, because there has been studies on twins where they've looked at twins raised in families with an alcoholic father. One twin became an alcoholic, and the other twin didn't. And when each of them was asked, each said it was because my father was an alcoholic. So two very different responses to the same upbringing.
Yeah. I think I've actually heard a similar one where one of the twins went to jail and the other one became like a multi-millionaire. I don't know whether it's stable.
Became a lawyer and got the other one out jail.
It was
a big scheme all along.
Very, very deep, very philosophical here.
Well, very profound, very profound. Well, I just see it all the time. I see and hear people blaming, like, oh, well, it's the education system. It's their fault that I haven't learned about property. I haven't picked up a book and done the effort, but it's because of the education system that I'm not proceeding. I don't understand tax. It's too boring. I'm not interested. All those kind of excuses. There is a point to when you got to stop blaming other people and take it by the horns, or whatever the saying is. Anyway,
Joe's on the soapbox. I love it.
Let me get off this thing.
7 minutes and 47 seconds in, and there's your first nugget. Love it.
Enjoy, guys.
We are all responsible for our own journeys.
Yes. Before we introduce the wonderful Meighan Wells, we are going to jump into our first sponsor, and then we're going to learn all about you, Meighan. I'm excited. Let's do it. The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yield, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia. And not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
I know,
There you
Joe.
go.
I'd love to get it. I'd love to give a shout out to the guy putting the links in there. How good is he? Like he's just Anyway, I'll stop plugging myself. I was sinking in. So on to the person we've got on who I've been excited about all day, and I've even I've prepared a not presentation. I've prepared an intro for you off your website actually. So I've prepared it all for you from your website. So you're telling us before you've got an MBA and degrees in psychology and HR. So that's probably why I think there's something. I did HR and organizational development as well. So you have an appreciation of. Yeah, I know. And I've never practiced HR, so I worked that one out. So I just realised that human resources is actually not about kind of helping people. It's about anyway, that's another story for another time. So you
arming the organisation with the right people in the right place at the right time.
Exactly, all about efficiency and about costs and about kind of making sure people don't sort of chat. Yeah, so that wasn't so. But you've done some amazing things. Yeah, you've done the First Home Buyer Guide podcast, which we were on. So I think we'll put that on YouTube, all that sort of stuff. You're committed to excellence.
Actually, that went live today. It was awesome. That was such a good chat. For anyone who hasn't tuned in, that went live today. Sorry, I interrupted you, Jeff, but you guys were great. We have such a lot of fun on that podcast. And what we like to do is talk to people about their journeys and what you were able to share with what you went through, what you learned, how you educated yourselves, and what you're doing with your community now. It was just so good. So that went live today, your First Home Buyer Guide. And you can find that on, all your favorite downloadable spaces. But
/ Joe and Jeff. There you go.
Right. We'll put the link somewhere in the show notes.
One thing I realized in that experience was it's so different being on the other side. Like I can interview people for days. I'm very good at asking questions. I enjoy it. But when people are asking me questions, I'm like, whoa, stop asking me questions. That's my job. So it was a good fun though. It was good fun. Jeff, you've got an introduction to introduce, please.
Yeah, I was doing it, man. So the thing that I think is most exciting about you, Meighan, is that you were recognised as the REIQ Real Estate Institute Queensland. For those who don't know what that is the Buyers Agent of the Year for 3 years in a row. So you must have been absolutely sort of knocking it out of the park, and still continue to do so. So and you're I suppose you're representing the industry. You're shaping the industry. So that's something. Tell us something though in that bio that I read about you that we don't know that you're passionate and you're excited about.
Look, at the heart of it, I'm a mother of 2 boys. So I'm raising 2 little boys to be good men. That's my mission in their lives. I like the beach. I like scuba diving. I discovered scuba diving in February, and I just absolutely love it. Get underwater. No one can ring you. No one can email you. No one can talk to you. You can't talk to anybody. Down there. It's just no COVID.
No COVID.
It is an amazing world down there. I absolutely love it. And I'm a beach babe by heart. I grew up surfing, life-saving, lifeguarding. That was my whole passion before I went into business, and kind of lost myself for a little while there. But you're very generous in pointing out that, I did win the Buyers Agent of the Year for 3 years, and it was actually the inaugural year and the 2 years after that. So it was the first time that the REIQ had introduced the award into Queensland. And there was also an Australian REIA award at the time as well. And it was really quite, for me, it was a bit of a recognition of, I was not the first buyer's agent in Queensland. A guy by the name of Scott McGeever was one of the first, and he is the pioneer of buyer's agency in Australia, and I have great respect for him. And he still is a fantastic operator in Queensland now. But what we were doing at that time is the 2 startups, I guess you call, is we were creating businesses and creating industries at the same time. And it was a really interesting thing because you're trying to build your own brand and you're trying to find your own processes. And I'm very systematic. I'm ex-PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I'm highly systematic. I'm project oriented. I like things to run and have checklists, and, nothing moves from one part to the next until you've done that bit, and everything relies on the other bit. So whilst I'm also opportunistic, I like to have my systems and my processes set up. And in doing that at that time, talking back in 2003, there wasn't anyone else to go to say, how do you do it? What do you what is the process? There wasn't an educational program for buyer's agents. You just became a real estate agent, and then you kind of worked it out from there. All of the legislation, I had a big hand in working with the RAIQ to change the legislation to acknowledge buyer's agents, that we existed and we were part of the process, and everything that we talked about when we had forms and legislation and so forth, it wasn't just selling, it actually included buying as well. So there was a huge amount of work that was done back in that sort of 2004 to even up to about 2012, where we had to actually change a lot of people's thinking and how they thought about how property is purchased and how transactions take place, and re-educating real estate agents and agencies and big franchises and working with them to adjust their mindset around, this is a legitimate part of the transaction, and we're going to keep pushing away and be part of the table, and we will be part of the table because we're representing the buyer as they're representing the seller.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the number off the top of your head, but how many transactions go through a buyer's agent in Australia? Because I know in the US it's like 70% of transactions go through a buyer's agent, which is just crazy to think about when we're here in Australia with such a low volume. But what does it kind of look like?
It's an interesting one, Joe, because in the US, and I researched the models in all countries when I was looking at setting up Property Pursuit. But the thing about the US is that they aren't. It's almost like a Chinese wall. So the buyer's agent and the seller's agent can actually be in the same agency, and they share in the seller's agent's commission, and the agency commission is about 6%. So the commissions are quite high. And someone chooses to have a buyer's agent or buyer's representative, I think they call them, represent them, but they're not paid by the buyer. So what we really stand up and shout from the rooftops is, here, you are represented by the person who you are paying. So in Australia, if you're not paying anybody, no one's representing you, not the real estate agent, not the spruiker, no one is representing you if you're not paying anybody. In the US, there's such a high number of people who are represented by buyer's agents or buyer's representatives or brokers, buyer broker is what they call in the US, because the buyer isn't paying anything. It's coming out of the seller's commission, which is quite high. So those two agents share the commission. They essentially conjunct. So I don't think it's necessarily, they're getting paid more if the buyer pays more. I don't see how that's in the buyer's interests.
Yeah. The incentives aren't aligned. That's what I've always liked about the buyer's agent side of things and the real estate agent. You've got one real estate agent that's paid by the vendor, and then who is going to be on your side? And there are people that get kickbacks from the people that purchase the property, like property spruikers. And you need to have in one of the other ads that we have for one of the other guys, it's like aligning those incentives and making sure that all the incentives line up and match up.
Whose interests are aligned. I recently completed a purchase for a managing partner of a law firm, and he negotiates multi-million dollar contracts all the time, like really complex, big settlements, commercial deals and so forth. And initially, I bought for them about 12 years ago, and when they were ready to downsize, they came back to me. And he said, people can't understand why I'd use a buyer's agent because I negotiate things all the time. But he said, it's about people and emotions, and you taught me that. I can't deal with people and emotions. I can deal with numbers and facts and figures and hard lines and contract condition negotiations. But no one gives a toss about, where are you going to live and what settlement terms do you want and how do we kind of tweak this a little bit so it works and we don't have to pay more money. So, it was one of those moments, and I've had it many times over the years, but it's understanding that you can be an expert in an area of negotiation, but it doesn't necessarily apply to property, because property is more about people than it is, contracts. Contracts are just a way of getting people to agree to something.
Yeah. What are some of the questions? Because there are a lot of some buyers agents, and there are some property professionals that offer their services and spruikers that can kind of all get mixed in together. What are some of the ways that we can identify a great buyer's agent? What are some of the things that a great buyer's agent is doing that a not so great buyer's agent is that we can poke some
Oh,
holes in and
we're
find
going in
out?
a whole different direction here, guys. I love this.
Oh
What-
yeah, this is.
We were going to start off with Meighan's story, and Joe, you
Oh, okay. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Sorry, I've dived in deep, but I know people.
You're in
are
there.
like,
You want to know the answers. You're asking the hard questions.
Okay, yes, we'll get to that question, but I'm more interested now that Jeff has shook me a little bit. It's not about me. It's not about me. Okay, yeah, but yes, give us. How'd you get into property? 2003, you started the business, or 2003 or 4.
End of 2003. We just had our 18-year celebration, actually, and we forgot about it. So, whoops, too busy. It was that busy we forgot that it happened.
Even tell us about, take us back to the first property purchasing when I believe you were 23 from my reading. So you're 23, you bought your first property. Tell us about that purchase and how
it goes back a little bit further because my mum and dad were always really interested in property, and dad in particular would come down to. I was at university in Newcastle, and renting, and I just didn't get this whole why would I pay someone else, and we were looking at flats at the beach and so forth. Oh, maybe we could buy this and we could do this and we could renovate it, and that kind of got me a little bit switched on to things. And it was very soon after I started working full time that I actually went into a property with my brother and my parents. They went Guarantor, so it was their property that we used as guarantee. And I bought a house in Gordon Park, which is about 6 kilometres north of the CBD, for $141,000. Sorry, yes, I did, and it was the outskirts of Brisbane at the time. It's now quite sought after area, but it was a classic workers' cottage that was falling off its stumps, and it had some white ants, and the guy had died. The old elderly gentleman had died in there, and there was nicotine stains all up the walls, and he had his tool shed upstairs because he's in a wheelchair, so he never went out of the house. So his tool shed was actually in the second bedroom. It was just hilarious, I made just about every mistake that a first-time buyer could make in that purchase. I thought the agent was looking after my interests. I went with what he recommended in the offer. I didn't have a building and pest inspection because he said, don't worry about it, you need to renovate it anyway. There was just, when I renovated it, I didn't have a licensed builder. I thought I could own a builder, and back then there was some grey areas, but man, I made it really grey, like I made it black. So that was my first purchase. It did make me money, and it set me up for the next one and so forth. But it was, had I not had that family support to be able to do that, it would have taken me a lot longer to get into property.
Yeah, I like to think of like the guarantor situation, like a hand up rather than a hand out.
Yeah.
Because
they never put any money into it, but it was the equity in their own home that allowed me to borrow 110% at the time. Yeah.
At the time, yeah. You didn't need to worry about serviceability. It was like, can you take a loan? Yes, I can. Great, fantastic.
Well,
we'll take it.
Well, Joe, I'll just correct you on that, because serviceability is the thing you need to worry about. You don't need to be concerned about the deposit. That's what the guarantor takes care of. So you still need to be able to.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just referring to like low doc loans previously. But yeah.
Oh, I've signed a few low doc loans in my purchasing history as well when the business was in its early years. And my strategy has largely been to buy, renovate, and stepping stone. So I've done more of a stepping stone strategy to get into the home that I wanted to be in, but which I sold last year, sadly. But I've lost my train of thought now. Where were we?
The first property.
The first one. So that stepping stone idea, that really has suited me because I'm hands-on. I quite like the idea of transforming something and adding value to it. That's quite worked for me. More in the bit diversified now, and more spread across residential and commercial. But that was my first one, and I learned so much out of that first one and the second one and the third one, and then working in with builders who were project managing, and I was just sort of managing them. So there's been so many things. I love talking to people who have also learnt a lot along the way. I'm a bit reluctant to necessarily engage in conversations with people who are very just overtly proud of the outcome rather than willing to talk about the process, because I think you learn more from people about the process they went through than the outcome that they achieved.
So on that point, what are the top 3 things in purchasing property that you've learned about the process?
In renovating or investing?
Just investing in general.
I think the thing that, looking back, I didn't necessarily have as good a idea about where I wanted to go. I had a broad, I want to have, an amazing home in an elevated position that was, I loved living in, and it had a pool and, all those sorts of things. I kind of had that's where I want to go. But how I got there was sometimes a little bit haphazard. And I learnt more along the way about how I had to be more systematic about it. So rather than going, oh, that's a good opportunity, I'll put an offer in and then see what the bank will lend me. I learned I learned that, there's a really structured, systematic way to do this the right way to make sure that you don't get yourself, caught up in a rolling ball of crap, really, that you can't get yourself out of. And you need to find out more about yourself before you start your journey, and what your borrowing capacity is, and where your risk profile is, and how far can you be pushed before you fall into bed in a curl up in a ball and can't function because you're worried about interest rate rises. So you need to know a lot more about yourself and what journey you're trying to take yourself on, and have that bigger picture, I think, is the thing that I learned. And then you can be in a better position to take on opportunities when they come up.
Yeah. How do you because I bet this happens to you all the time. You get like I'm gonna take it off script probably here, but not that we have a script, but we have like a follow through. But when we have so when you have an investor that's just saved their deposit, right? They've been saving for the past 8 years. 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, they finally got their deposit and they're super excited just to buy their property. Like, how do you get them? Like, what would you say to somebody like that? I've just saved my 80,000, my 100,000, or 60,000, or whatever it is that's going to allow them to get into the property, and they've come full gun. Okay, where do I buy a property? What do you?
Oh, do you know what's really interesting? Because I'm not going to answer the question. I will in a roundabout way. But I think the thing is, you've got to know which steps to take in which order, and it's something that, as a buyer's agent, we structure every single property purchase as a project. So they have to go through every one of the 10 steps systematically and logically. They're educated along the way. They know what's happening, when it's happening, why it's happening. So when a good property is there, they're actually ready to move because they're really well educated. They understand. They've been through the process. They know how much they can borrow and so forth. So if you've done the hard yards and saved a deposit, the next thing to do is not to open up realestate.com and start looking at open houses, because you could completely ruin what your expectations around what what you could actually be buying. It's really lovely as a home buyer or an investor to say, right, high income suburb with low crime statistics and some of the other metrics that get thrown around as being good investment criteria. But if you can't afford to buy in that area, then you're going to skew your expectations about what you should be actually looking at and what's realistic. It also could mean that $80,000 that you've saved so far, if you saved a little bit more, you might actually be able to stretch to something that put you in a better position. So systematically, I'd say go back to step one. You've got your $80,000 or whatever the amount might be. Now you need to start building your team and talk to people in their own lane, in their own specialisation, in their own capacities as professionals. Start building a team around you that can give you the right advice and tell you what to do with that now that you've got that money and you've worked so hard for it. Because the last thing you want to do is put that in the wrong place, lose it, and then the opportunity cost is that you've lost any potential capital growth that you would have had in a better performing asset. So step one is to put your team around you and to find the right people who are going to help you understand where you are in your life. You know, it's about you. Where are you in your life? Are you single? Are you just coupled up? Are you about to have a baby? Are you going to go from 2 incomes to 1 income? Are you planning to be single for the rest of your life, which is quite a reasonable, and many people are making that choice now. Do you plan to just be here for a period of time until the borders open up and then you're back traveling and working overseas again? So understanding about yourself is a really important one from a financial planning point of view, and finding a financial planner who is pro-property is gold, because most of them aren't pro-property, and most of them will want to put you into managed funds because that's where they'll most likely make more money. But finding a financial advisor.
Yeah, so I when I was, I don't know, 18 or something, I was like, oh, financial advisor, they know all about the finances, they have all the money. So I went up to one and I said, hey, let's have a consultation. They're like, we'll do a free consultation. I was like, oh, well, that's my type of guy. And then he said he'll draw me out a financial plan and we'll invest in shares, and I'll do all the share investing for you. The plan will cost $10,000, and it'll be a static thing here that you can just use and buy, and then I'll buy all these shares for you. And I was like,
who's charging $10,000? That's ridiculous. $10,000 for a financial plan. I mean, maybe.
So for me, there's a question, Jeff. Financial planners, like, from a my thoughts on financial planners are that you don't necessarily need one, but what are some of the values that you've seen in your experience with financial planners that they actually bring to the property table when they are not a managed fund nonsense one?
I think the thing that they do is make you reflect. You've got to reflect, right? Because you might have an idea. I want to buy a property. Why? Why do you want to buy a property? What is it going to do for you? What is it that you need this property for, particularly investors? And a lot of people can't answer that question. And they can't say, well, what is it that I want this property for? Is it because I want an extra $10 cash in my hand each week? Is it because I want financial freedom? Do I want to retire earlier? It's actually quite a lot of self-reflection. So it's actually having that big picture, long-term view, and actually extrapolating out. I'm here now. I want to be there then, but I want to be there then. So how do I actually get to that point? And it's not just about buying as many properties that you can. So if you're a bit more methodical about it and a bit more systematic about it, you can actually work out, well, if I buy one now and I buy that then, and then I do some share investing then, and you can actually plan out how you get to your end game, or your middle game if it is, because it isn't just about being the person, he who dies with the most toys doesn't win. And he who has the most properties isn't necessarily the winner either. So it's understanding why you're doing this and what you want it to achieve, which will actually self-reflect back on you to say, well, which properties are actually going to help me achieve that? Is it a house and land package in Logan? Well, I don't know what that's going to achieve, except to, for pay a lot of money and not get a lot of return, but that's my personal view. So that's one part of the puzzle. So certainly that is one of the support crew that we encourage people to talk to, in their lane and with their expertise. A mortgage broker is essential. If you're going to talk to your bank, that's okay, but we strongly recommend talking to a mortgage broker who really understands mortgage strategy and can talk about long-term views. And having the conversations around what you want the property for and what it might be in the future is so much more important than what is the interest rate. And the reason that I say that is that a lot of people buy their first property and they have in the back of their mind, I might keep this as an investment property when I upgrade. So they're doing a bit of a stepping stone strategy to step along the way up to, step themselves up as their income increases or equity increases. So if the mortgage broker doesn't understand that bigger picture, you might actually end up with the wrong structure and things in the wrong place. Because as a general rule, and this is not advice, but as a general rule, if you're going to have an investment property, you want it as highly leveraged as you can for the tax deductibility. But if it's your principal place of residence for the long term, then you want to be paying down that non-deductible debt. So if you do that round the wrong way and turn a principal place of residence into an investment property, then your lending might be on the wrong side of the ledger for the best benefits that you could possibly access. So your mortgage broker needs to know what your strategy is for the property that you're buying, not just now, but what might it be in a few years' time, and how much flexibility do you need in your mortgage, and how do you set up your fixed term and your variable loans and so forth, so that you are able to make those changes if you want down the track.
So how many...
Go on, Jeff.
I was going to say, how many people actually come to you and know the answers to these questions, though? Because if I'm starting off my journey, I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 or 10 years. So how do you help guide people through that process?
A lot of questions. So we do a lot of, that getting to know, as a buyer's agent, we do a lot in the getting to know you phase of things. And we do a lot of this, we haven't talked about a lot, but your first home buyer guide is this upfront part of getting to know yourself and having a think about and self-reflecting and actually challenging your thinking around why you're buying a property and where are you and where are you in your life cycle and where do you think you might be in the coming years. You don't know necessarily the answer to that, but it starts you thinking about it. And it's one of those things, if you don't know what you don't know until you start thinking, and if you've got a partner, you're talking about it, you might have one idea and they might have a completely different idea. And until someone says, well, have you thought about, or what are you going to do? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? What will this property actually, will you still own this property in 8 years? One of you might go, oh God, no, I'm getting rid of this in 3 years. And the other one might think, no, I'm living here for 10 years. We're not moving. So it's an important part of, you might not know, but it actually starts the conversation. And cognitively, once that starts to roll on, then you start challenging yourself around other things as well. Well, will I be in this job in 10 years' time? Might not. Should I be thinking that I'll have more income, less income? Do I want to stop work in 15 years? Once you start having those sorts of thoughts, then you're starting to think long term, because property is long term.
Yeah. But how far into the future do you like, because to be honest, I don't know where I'll be in 10 years. But how far into the future do we look to join us? Join the group.
Yeah, there's no crystal balling. That's the thing. But you can have a plan. And I guess that's the thing, is to have a think about, don't just go, I'm going to buy a property. Why are you buying this property? Is it just for somewhere to live? Is it because you want it to achieve something? Is it the first step onto something else? It's actually making yourself really have a think and do a little bit of navel gazing and say, why am I doing this? Is it just because everybody else is, and it is very un-Australian not to own your own home? Well, that's not necessarily a reason. Maybe rent vesting is a better answer. So I think this, purely from a psychological point of view, this is actually stopping yourself from just going, I need to go and get a property. Well, step back. Maybe it's in 10 years we may or may not be doing this, but at least we've thought about it.
Yeah. I'd love to get in the comments, what are your guys' reasons for buying property, right? Like, have you thought deeply about that to even make it to the next step? Because that's phase one, right? Like, get that grounding and that understanding.
Yeah. And it's about you. It's not about anybody else. You shouldn't ever be looking to make such a significant investment and a long-term investment just because everybody else is, or because somebody has said that, you really need to get into property. And that is said. It's a barbecue conversation. It's a water cooler conversation. And it's a good conversation to have because you're gathering different information and different views and different opinions. But I guess what we like to suggest, from your first home buyer guide, is talk to the experts in their fields, gather all this information, these ideas and so forth, but then go and talk to the experts in their fields about your unique situation. And the reason that that's so important is because the most asked question that we ever see in forums, that we ever hear, that we are ever asked is, where should I buy? And it's not the first question. It's, why should I buy? And why am I buying? Yeah. Where should I buy should come as a result of doing some of that upfront work. So the financial advisor is a big one. The mortgage broker is a big one, because you've got to know what you can and can't borrow and have an idea of how to set that up. It can also tell you if you saved a little bit more, or if you used a little bit of LMI, how that would change your capacity. So it gives you options. And I think having a mortgage broker that challenges or just gives you the options and doesn't simply say, no, you should avoid this or don't do this, or, everyone's doing that, is probably not the best mortgage broker. A mortgage broker that says, well, if this is the way that you're going, you could do this, or you could do this, or here's another option for you. So it's actually someone who presents you with options that suit your situation. That's someone who's probably going to be working in your best interest to get the best outcome for you.
Yeah. And I think setting the expectation with them and saying, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build property. I'm trying to do X, Y, Z. I'm trying to build this property portfolio to do this, this, and this. What is the best step? And then they tell you the exact, great. How does that help me into the next purchase? And how does that help me into the next purchase? And then if they look at you blankly, it's probably not the right person. But if they're like, oh, well, the reason we're doing LMI,
but the interest rates are really good. Yeah.
And you get this $4,000
really good
refinance bonus, which is going to be really help you buy the Christmas presents and help you go on holiday this year.
Yeah, it's because I really like the color yellow. That's why
it's a good point, because it's got to be about you, not about them, not about what what's the biggest commission they get, or who have they got the best relationship with, or anything like that. But someone who, a broker who can push back and go, okay, so this is the first one. Is there anything else that you're planning? Is anything else coming up? Do you need a new car? Is there a baby on the way that we need to think about? Is there, those sorts of questions are really important, because there's nothing harder than going from 2 incomes to 1 income and trying to budget based on, 1 income when you've done all your figures on 2 incomes. Or if you do want to use equity to leverage into a second property and a third property, setting up the first one is so, so important to make sure that when you go to use that equity, you know whether it's going to be, and I always stumble over this word, cross-collateralized, or if it can be standalone. And there's such, thank you, I nailed it. It's got to be the first time ever. But that's really important, because if you don't understand that, you could actually end up, if one property performs badly, you might have to dip into the equity of the other property to top up the one that's doing badly. And that's a really tough situation to be in.
Yeah, 100%. You don't want to be doing one growing all this rate, and then the other one just kind of sits there, and then you've got to move your funds, and you think
move your funds around and refinance, and
you're stuck there. Who are the other team members? So we've got mortgage broker, we've got financial planner. What are some of the other core guys and girls?
At this stage, we always recommend having a chat with an accountant, because depending on whether you're purchasing for principal place of residence or investing, the purchasing entity is really, really important. So that's whose name's going to be on the contract. Now, for a lot of getting started, certainly your principal place of residence is most likely going to be in your personal names. But if you're purchasing with somebody else, say you're doing a joint purchase, or you are using a guarantor, it might be a company setup or a trust, or there might be a different entity. But there are different ways that those entities are treated from a tax perspective, as you go along through the ownership of the property, and also on disposal of the property. So it's so important to have a conversation with an accountant before you buy the property, because changing the entity after you buy it, in most cases, will incur another lot of stamp duty. It's essentially a sale to a new entity. So having a conversation with an accountant might sound complex, but it's really, really important, particularly if it's an investment property, and more importantly, if you're investing with somebody else, whether it be a partner or a friend or a brother or parents, or whatever the case may be. So accountant, big part of it. Solicitors also an important one to have a chat with. In different states, the process of purchasing is quite different. So in New South Wales, the solicitor is part of the review of the contract before any kind of exchange. In Queensland, the real estate agent prepares a contract, and a buyer can sign a contract without ever having a solicitor review it. So we don't recommend that people just go out and sign contracts, because you might have the wrong conditions on it. It might not be in your favour, even though there's standard contracts. Getting the conditions right on a conditional offer is really important. Or if you're going to auction, making sure you know what rights you're actually waiving by making an unconditional offer and bidding an auction. So a chat with a solicitor, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but I guarantee you the money that you spend on some of these people are going to save you in the long term from making some fairly hefty and pricey mistakes. So they're kind of your big ones. And then, you're not going to be surprised that I would say talk to a buyer's agent. Now, buyer's agents can either be part of the whole process, and this is what we want to teach people. They can either be part of the whole process or they can do small parts of the process for you. But what we want to make sure people do is actually know, before they go to a buyer's agent, to know the process so that they're an active participant in the process, and they know when they're talking to a buyer's agent, and a buyer's agent is talking to them about different fundamentals and why a property is recommended and how it was priced and so forth. If you know the groundwork behind that, you're in a really powerful position to make decisions, and you're not just handing over your decision-making power to somebody else. So whilst you might have someone on the ground doing this for you who is an expert and who has done it, I've done about 720 times. I've added it up today. So that's a lot of mistakes and a lot of background to have. But I would never want a client to actually just blindly say, whatever you think, that's what we'll do. I like to educate people through the process to make sure that when we get to an outcome, they go, yep, that makes sense. I understand. We've talked through all of these fundamentals. I understand where the risks are. I know what the potential is and all of those sorts of aspects to it. They're empowered. So I think a big part of working with a buyer's agent is to make sure that you're still empowered through the process. And ultimately, whilst we advise, you decide, and that's a cornerstone of buyer's agents who practice, certainly in my buyer's agency. So that's one other party that you might involve either in the full process, or if you don't like auctions, you might get them to bid, or if you're unsure about pricing, you might get them to do the pricing and negotiation part of it. So you can chop that up a little bit as well.
So how is the buyer's agent, like, in this market, very, very hot market that's coming on at the moment? How valuable is it? More valuable to have? Is it like in a hot market or a cold market? Like, when's the best time for somebody to have a buyer's agent?
When they're buying a property.
Ask a stupid question. When's the best time to get a haircut, Mr. Barber?
When you walk into my shop. No, it's not a bad question. So I've always said, so we've ridden through about 7 cycles in the time that I've been in the property industry, and the value proposition of a buyer's agent changes according to where we are in the market. So when it is a buyer's market, when there's lots of properties to choose from and there's not many buyers competing, what the advantage a buyer's agent can bring to the table is significantly different to when we're in a seller's market. And in that market, you're looking for somebody who really can weed through all of the options that are out there and narrow down to the very best, and then be incredibly tough in the negotiation, because you have the opportunity to be tough in a negotiation when there's not many people competing for properties. Flip it around to where we are at the moment, and the advantage of a buyer's agent is you are not going to get a bargain. You're not going to get a good deal. What they are going to bring to the table is to get you into the property before anybody else, if they're right on the ball and the relationships that they have with agents are really good. So they should get in the door before the photos are getting taken or when the photos are getting taken. And then be able to price it as accurately as possible in a rapidly rising market, to make sure that you're not overpaying, but that you're not continually missing out as well. And that's the frustration that we're seeing from buyers in the marketplace at the moment, is they don't know how to price, but they're too scared to overpay, and they keep either over pitching or under pitching. And that's a really dangerous place to be in a rapidly moving market, whether it's rapidly moving up or it's rapidly moving down. So buyer's agents should get you to the properties quicker than anybody else can, and get you to a point where you can actually make a decision and move forward with all the information that you need. And that's a big thing. Too many people are moving forward without the information that they should have, and they're taking a huge amount of risks. So the risk management side of things, and I just saw a comment in there, typical answer for a buyer's agent: I am a buyer's agent and I'm proud of it. The thing at the moment is, hey?
It's addictive looking at those comments. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it was just one that caught me. It's like, yeah. I'm here for a reason. I'm just sharing it with you.
Yeah.
But it is actually, and there was a question there about can they keep the emotion out of the process? Absolutely. Because the thing that drives prices up at auction, there's two emotions: it's ego and it's fear of loss. So buyers agents take that out of the auction process. And if you've ever stood at an auction and watched two ego bidders, it is something to behold. I'm just going to win. I saw one that should have sold for about 1.2 go to 1.41, just two ego bidders.
Can I ask a question about an option there? Because let's just say I'm not going to use a buyer's agent, because I love to kind of play both sides of the fences in buyer's agent, not buyer's agent. I'm pretty agnostic with that. I know but if I'm going an auction, what are kind of a couple of ways that I can do my best to keep the emotion out of it?
Oh, good question. And we have a big part of the course is around actually understanding the auction process. The auction process is actually a systematic psychological process of gathering bidders, putting those bidders in competition to a point where they fear losing the property, and then putting them in a pressure cooker of a situation where they have to make decisions on the fly in very short amounts of times. And often there's a lot of script and dialogue that agents and really good auctioneers use in that auction process. And there is nothing more enjoyable than going and watching auctions when you are not bidding at an auction. I encourage people to go to as many auctions as they possibly can when they're going to purchase, particularly in the southern states where they're so prevalent in the capital cities. But it's even becoming more prevalent in Queensland, in Brisbane. But going and watching, you can actually see how the process of gathering the bidders and getting them to the property is one part of the process, but then how the agents and the auctioneers speak to and interact with the buyers during the auction process is something that you really have to watch and be aware of, because it is a psychological process of, and some of the things the auctioneers say are absolutely brilliant. Bidder number 4, surely you don't want to take your wife back to the car crying because the keys went to his wife. These sorts of things, you really bring that out. Emotive, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Sort of response to things. So it is an emotional process.
You get in trouble for saying something like that these days. Are you? Surely it's got to be, because you can have the wife bidding as well. Sure, you don't want to take your husband back to the car.
So what are some of the tips?
So you asked what are some of the things? Yeah. It's really
what are some of the tips we can use?
Joe, it's about understanding the process and then making sure you remove yourself from the emotion of the process. It's being really well prepared. There's some great information out there, but you've got to be careful who the information is coming from. My partner in crime, Veronica Morgan, she's written a brilliant book, How to Bid at Auction Even If You're Scared Shitless. She's a bit of a potty mouth. I forgive her for that. But it is a really good book that outlines the systematic process of how auctions are done and how to prepare yourself. So it's the asset has to be, actually, the amount of people that I've heard say, I want to buy a property, but I won't buy at auction. Well, it's not about how you buy it. It's actually about what you buy. So the asset selection has to be the first piece of the puzzle. So getting that right. Yeah. If it is going to auction, that's simply a different way of purchasing rather than a blind, offers, private treaty sort of situation. I'd rather buy a property at auction every day of the week because I can see what every other bidder's doing. I bought one on Friday at a in-rooms auction for $1,000 more than the underbidder. That was 1.361. I paid for that. If it was a private treaty, we may have gone up over 1.4. So that actually worked in my buyer's favour to be in a public auction. But knowing that the asset is right first, setting your limit based on your data research, your evaluation, where the market is going, what the direction is, and what your capacity is. So bringing those factors into play to set a limit, writing that limit down and stress testing yourself. So it's really important to stress test yourself, and that way you or partner, if you're both there, not there, whatever the case may be, can't be tempted to step over the stress limit. And the stress limit is really about, if you weren't there and I was, and I rang you and said it went for X dollars, would you slam the phone down and be upset, or would you go, no way, wouldn't pay it? And you kind of have to work yourself to that point of, you know what, I wouldn't pay that. Everything under that's in, everything over that's out. And then you've got that, you put in writing, that's it, we're not going over it. And if it goes for $1,000, I've missed out on properties for $1,000. I've bought next time within the budget. So, you know, that's just how it goes. But you've got to set that limit.
What if you wrote, that might be a good little thing for you. You write your number down on a piece of paper and you hold it close, and
just don't show the agent.
Just look at it and be like, still going. And then, sorry, we're gone. Done.
Gone. We're gone. Okay. It's yours. Congratulations.
Now, like with auctions, right? Like having your hand up, how do you win an auction? You be the last one with your hand up. But are there any kind of tips and tricks that we can utilize that we can make and help us in our journey on the auction bidding front?
Yeah, look, I've said this publicly, so there's nothing that I'm going to reveal here that that is going to be groundbreaking. But you've got to be confident but not arrogant, and there's a fine line between those two personas, and that is, I'm going to buy the property, and you can bid against me, that's fine, but it's actually unsettling the other bidders during the process. And to a degree, trying to interrupt the train of thought of the auctioneer. So they've got a script and dialogue. They've got a process that they're going to follow. They have a fairly well thought out way that they're going to achieve the outcome. But there's actually two sides to the story in an auction. There's the bidders who you can see, and then there's the owner who has a reserve who you can't. So there's two things you've got to do. It's one, convince the other buyers that they might as well stop because you're going to buy it without being arrogant about it. And that can be done through changing the pace of the delivery of the bids and also the increments of the bids. But the other person who you have to be mindful of is the seller, because if the seller's reserve is too high, there may be a period of negotiation through the auctioneer or the agent where you actually have to work to get that reserve down. And that can be an off-floor negotiation that takes part. That's an incredibly vital part of the auction process that isn't talked about very much. And it can be incredibly powerful, because if you're in a position where you can bid unconditionally in an auction, but there's 4 or 5 other people on the sidelines who haven't quite got their finance lined up, or they have to sell something else, or the bonus hasn't come through yet, or whatever the case may be, they can't bid unconditionally, but they could put an offer in after the auction. You don't want those people involved. You want to keep them out. You want to actually buy that property if you can on auction terms and conditions on the day under the hammer. So a big part that isn't talked about a lot is the during auction negotiation. Now, there's not a lot of that going on at the moment. There's too many buyers around, and the prices push themselves up over the reserve, and so there's not a lot of to and froing happens. You just have to interrupt the flow of the auction if you can in those situations.
What does that mean? So you said that before, you got to trip the agent up on his script.
I didn't say trip him up.
Well, not trip him up.
You're putting words in
interrupt his flow.
Interrupt his flow. What does that mean?
Well, just if you can imagine, if things are going up, auctioneers will always try and start with high increments, whether it's $100,000 or $50,000, and they'll try and keep those increments fairly steady, because once people, it's fast. You can't think very quick. Another 50. Another 50. But what is another 50? Another 50 takes a 2. Oh, okay. So you don't have a lot of time to think when it's running that quickly. So if you can interrupt the flow of it, and it might be if the auctioneer is calling, 50, 50, another 50, 50 over there, blah, blah, blah. If you call out a number, it stops people's thinking patterns. So they're thinking in 50s, but if you call out, let's say we're at $1 million and going up in $50,000 increments. If you say 1,052,000, people go, yep.
I'm going to say 1 million.
And the auctioneer had to say the number.
12,000, because I don't want to bid 52. I want to bid 12,000. And then the auctioneer is going to say, mate, this is person. This is not going to fly. I'm not going to accept that offer. I'm not going to accept that bid.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a recommendation about the increment, but simply actually changing the way that the number was represented. Yeah. So it's
super interesting because you don't
yeah,
think about it, right? You just
because you got to think about
throws
how
their
people are
hand
thinking. It's an incredibly psychological process, and it's very heavily researched by the big franchise houses. And if you ever get the opportunity to really, really sit down with an auctioneer, my goodness, they are fascinating people. So they, the amount of work they put into their craft is incredible. And the way that they actually run those auctions, when you get a good auctioneer and a good auction agent, it is quite phenomenal to watch. The way that they actually can move people and direct them in the way that those people never expected to be directed. So interrupting that flow and changing the flow or the pattern of that is a way to change and almost take people out of the coma of the frenzy of the auction, because you kind of want to, people go, oh gosh, how many, can we keep going? If you slow it down and make people stop, then they go, oh, hang on, we're really close to our limit. Maybe, then they start thinking logically.
Yeah, I like that. That's super. That's I really like the interrupt the flow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So
Well,
there's lots and lots of tips and lots of ways to approach it, but there's no single methodology to bid at an auction, because you actually have to be observing the people, the auctioneer and the auction agents, and it's that observation and knowing how to change what you're doing to interrupt their flow and actually gain the upper hand. That's the beauty of having auction experience. It's quite an enjoyable process once you get your hands around it, but it is a very daunting process as well if you're only doing it once or twice. But go and watch them and watch them as an observer. And they're really. If you love property, go and watch auctions, real auctions, not the block, not online, none of that. Go and watch live auctions. Fascinating.
I love it. Okay, well, before we head on to the next topic, we've got a sponsored ad, so we've got to run into that, and then we can jump into.
We got to talk about where to buy. I want to know where to buy, because that's what people are coming here. We will talk about.
That's what they're here for. Let's do it. Okay, we'll learn where to buy. Selling a property. It isn't something we do every single day. There's actually more involved in the process than you may initially think. Like, how do you find the best agent? How do you ensure that you're going to pay the lowest fees? It's not easy, and then also throw in all the stress and pressure of selling. And that's why Scott Agate, a former real estate agent and expert property negotiator from Hello House, has created his leading agent finder service. After a 20-year career managing agents himself, Scott has personally conducted over 3,000 property transactions, along with running 3 Bell franchises. He knows all these agent tricks. Scott has created an in-depth 5-step process for his leading agent finder service. First, he establishes the true market value for your property. He uses a triangulation method to shortlist the leading agents, creates a competitive environment for those agents to send through their best proposals, vets those proposals, and then he negotiates the best agent fees for you. This ensures that you're not only getting the best rate for selling, but most importantly, you have a leading agent on your side selling your property to maximize the end sale value. Oh, and did I mention this service is completely free? If you'd like to know exactly how Scott runs his 5-step leading agent finder service, he's detailed it with the link below. Or if you'd like to speak with Scott to help find you the leading agent in your area, book a call today.
Yeah, Joe, I even got the links right this week as well. I think. Can I ask a pay rise, Joe? How much do we got?
No pay rise for you.
Well, let's negotiate after the show.
Okay. I got Scott on my side.
I just want to. I know I should be looking at the comments, but Steve, have I pronounced it right? Police.
Police.
Give me suburbs below market value, free of charge, please.
He's a bit cheeky, young Steve. I mean, he's got a.
He knows what other buyers agents get out there in the.
Oh, that's good. Oh, love this. Woo, back at you.
Which one?
Where to buy is the wrong question, Jeff Miles. It's why you should buy.
No, it's up to easy then. Come on, but nobody wants to buy. Oh, it's scary.
That's someone who's listening.
Yeah.
Yes, it's called. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, Jeff. What are we? And you go, Mal. I was saying, what are we
talking about? I want to know, because let's just say we've gotten the why we're buying and how we're buying. We've spoken to our team. We've done all these good things that are in the 10-step kind of Home Buyer Academy course that is going to be we're going to be able to offer to our community. Maybe not. We will be offering. So we want to know how do I figure out where to buy? Like what are the questions we talk about? That's what people want to know.
Yeah, it is. And as I said earlier, it is the first question that I get asked when I'm in a social situation. It's one of the most prevalent questions on the forums whenever we jump into property forums. And Veronica is prolific in going in because she's so interested in what people are asking and interested in so that we can come up with solutions and information for them, because there's no quick and easy answer. And I'm sorry if everyone drops out right now because I've just spoiler alert, there's no quick and easy answer. But you're right. When you've done those first of the 10 phases, when you've done those first 2, which is building the support crew and money, organizing your money side of things, the next bit is to actually do your planning. And when it's a home, you're kind of looking at your wish list, and we have a 3P process, which is looking at position, property, and price, and working out the compromises around those 3 things. What things are, what can't be changed, and often price can't be changed because that's often set by the bank. Position, when you're buying a home, sometimes it's a certain area that you have to be in for different reasons. Other times you can be a bit more flexible. Property, whether it's a unit, a villa, or a house, a renovator, a warehouse, whatever the case may be. Those 3 things, when you're an owner-occupier, are the key 3 areas of compromise that will tell you, once you go through a very structured process, where you can buy so that you can start your process of actually looking at where to buy. But as from an investor's point of view, which is what we're talking about here, and it's something that we're really excited to kind of bring to the table with you guys, is from an investor's point of view, where to buy is, for most people, somewhere in Australia. There was a little bit of a rush on the US post GFC. I don't know that there's been necessarily any other great buying sprees outside of Australia for Australians, but largely that's where people are going to buy, somewhere in Australia.
Yeah.
So you can either.
That's okay.
Yeah, you can either go bottom up, like where do I know, and I'll start there, or you can go top down and say, well, how do I go from these? How many? Was there 12,000 suburbs in Australia?
15,000, I think.
Yeah.
15,000 suburbs in Australia?
Yeah, 5,
well,
5, 6
we'll
million
Google check
homes.
that. So you can either go bottom up. I know my area, or I have a particular interest in a particular location. So that's your bottom up approach. Or you go top down and say, there is a vast country with a whole variety of housing options. How do I work out which one of those is best fit for my circumstances now that I've done a lot of navel gazing? I've done a lot of work around myself. I know what my goals are. I know what my capacity is. I know what my cash flow needs to be. This part of the process is actually, I'm not a stats person. Honestly, I just gloss over. I'm not particularly interested, but for data nerds, this is fun stuff, because you're taking an entire country. Really, when you go to a barbecue and you say, where would you buy? You are saying, where in Australia would you buy? And generally the answer is, well, I bought in, so therefore they will support and look for confirmation of what they've done themselves. And that's something you've got to be really careful of when you ask the question is, are they trying to support their own decisions, even though they don't know whether they've had success with that decision yet? Because buying isn't success. Success actually isn't realised for a 10 or 15-year time frame, often in property. So just buying, failure, exactly right. So you don't actually know if you've had that success or failure until you either, sometimes you get a point somewhere along the process where you might have a reval for to maybe draw out some equity and do some other borrowings. So unless you actually know the real value of the property at some point along the time, you don't know whether you've had success or not. So just having purchased somewhere isn't an answer that you should then take and say, oh, that sounds like a really good idea. I'll go and look at Ormo. because because there's lots of stock there, or there's lots of house and lands to be released, or whatever the case may be. So the question of where should I buy can either be addressed from a bottom-up or a top-down approach. And what we want to help people work through is the process of, once you understand yourself, how do you then understand how to find the best possible performing area that might then find you an asset that helps you select a high-performing asset, an A-grade asset. And there are so many locations around Australia where that might be the case, but in different price ranges. There's no use looking on the north coast, just above Sydney, because, the Central Coast area, if you've got $500,000 to spend, you need to look in different areas. So there's this whole process that we've developed that actually helps people work through from a top-down approach. Out of all of those suburbs, how do you assess socioeconomic factors? And why are they important? And what will it mean to property and growth in the long term? And what would the choice between one area that might perform at 7 or 8% per annum over a 10-year period, what's the difference between that and something that might perform at 6%? Because the compounding nature of property is so incredibly important to understand, because capital growth matters. It's not just the income that matters. Cash flow is important. You've got to understand that from an ability to service point of view. But it's actually the compounding nature of capital growth that is why people get into property. It's why they leverage and they take so much risk to get into property.
So we're not buying in Kappa Laba. I'm just trying to say that name that Terry was talking about. I've just butchered that, but I'm sorry.
Capalaba.
Capalaba. Oh, no, I said it wrong. Sorry. No.
Do you want to go for the next one? Do you remember the one that I threw up?
Capalaba.
What's that?
Indrapilli.
Indrapilli. That's easy to say. So, but I want to ask. We spoke about the top down versus the bottom up. Like, people are going. If I'm watching this right now, I'm thinking, what is the best way to do it? And I know that's a hard question to answer.
Depends a bit on your risk profile. So if you are a person who wants to explore all possibilities and you're really comfortable in your ability to look at process data and apply different layers of data, because we're talking about a lot of data analysis when you're looking at a top-down approach. And we're going to talk a little bit about where you can access some of this information, but you can do this yourself for free. It is possible to do this from free data, from the ABS, from all sorts of different sources. And we talk about this in when we're talking to people in this top-down approach. This is all free information if you've got the time and the analytical skills to actually drill down. So risk profile comes into a little bit. So for people who have a really low risk profile and property is part of their wealth building strategy, then their backyard feels a lot more comfortable to them. And so they're going to generally explore areas that they're familiar with. And that's not a bad thing, as long as they still apply, a real rigor around assessing the suburbs, not just because, they grew up next door to that suburb and they know it's a nice area, or 30 years ago Aunt May lived there and, I remember playing in the playground there. It was a lovely area. You've actually still got to have analytical rigor around suburbs that you feel comfortable in, because comfort doesn't equate to capital growth, and capital growth matters. It's, one of those core principles of Homebuyer Academy is capital growth matters, because you don't put that much money and that much leverage and that, lose that much opportunity cost just to get a little bit of income. It is important that you are choosing an asset that is going to perform really well from a capital growth perspective. So the bottom up often is for people who have a low risk profile and they need to feel comfortable, but you still have to put a lot of rigor, a lot of analytical rigor around choosing those comfortable suburbs. And if they aren't going to meet the expectations of your strategy and your goals, then you need to step out of your comfort zone or not invest in them. And that's a hard conversation to have with yourself, because there is no use investing in a mediocre, medium performing suburb that isn't going to do anything other than either perform below the median for the area or at the median. You might as well be doing something else with your money. So you want to be able to still have that rigor around choosing a suburb and analysing a suburb that is going to outperform the median. So risk profile is a big one. Bottom up, top down. Top down people tend to be open to a little bit more risk, and they are often open to the idea of having a lot more analysis themselves. But what we don't want to encourage people to do is just buy reports that tell them of, the top 10 suburbs that are going to skyrocket in the next 5 years. There's a pain and gain report that Veronica puts out every year, and she's actually done quite a bit of analysis around these sorts of predictions and recommendations, and in a lot of cases they've underperformed significantly over a 10-year period. So what we often look at from just one of many metrics, but one of the metrics we look at is the median house price growth. And if it's doing a bit of a V thing, so if anyone can see my finger, if it's doing a bit of a V, they're those suburbs that, they have a bit of interest and then they drop down again, and then they have a bit of interest and then they drop down again. But longitudinally, often they're sitting reasonably flat. So the only way you're going to ever make money in those sorts of suburbs is to buy at the bottom and sell at the top. Good luck with that. That is not a strategy.
Yeah, I heard somebody they were like one of these property experts, right? And they're like, we saw this area that was going to have this massive employment hub, and we bought and then we sold within 6 months and we made 30% on our money. And you go buy there now and it's worth absolutely nothing. I was like, how specific do you, how much research have you done to know to buy in and buy out at that exact same time? And nobody else is going to be able to do that. No. You got lucky, and now you're going to brand that all over the place. It's like, no, you didn't.
So true. As a buyer's agent, I can tell you, in 7 market cycles, we see the behavioural indicators when the market is turning, but you don't know the market has turned until after it's turned. So the behavioural indicators are changes in either buyer or seller behaviour. So that you're either got an increase in buyers, it's starting to go up, or you've got a decrease in buyers, it's starting to go down. Similarly, from a stock perspective. Now, despite what anyone says at the moment, there is not a lack of stock. And I've talked to Veronica, I've talked to Melbourne buyers agents and myself in Brisbane. There is not a lack of stock. In fact, there's more transactions happening now than every other year except 2000 no, I'm going to get it wrong. I think it was 2003 had higher number of transactions in Brisbane. But it's the second highest number of transactions in a year. It is just that the number of buyers is so far outweighing the number of properties for sale. That's the inequity in the equation. There's plenty of places selling. There are just way more buyers who want to buy them than are available to purchase.
And sorry, what are your thoughts? Yeah, and now I'm going to fall down the rabbit hole with you. But how long can this kind of how deep is the buyer pool at the moment, and how long do you think that?
Do I get my crystal kind of ball out, Joe?
Yeah, I said to someone, I might have said to you guys the other day when we were having a pre-chat, my first interview was in 2004 with the Courier Mail, and the article was Lies, Damn Lies and Statistics. And it was because I'm not a big fan of statistics when it comes to property, but I think if you get your overlays right and your behavioural analysis and your asset selection, that can all come into a very good big picture. But just statistics and median house prices on their own are not any sort of indication of good asset selection or how to choose a suburb. They are part of a bigger picture. But in that article, I said, I don't own a crystal ball and I've never been taught how to use one. You'll never hear me make a prediction. And in that time, since 2004, you can go back over every article I've been quoted in, written, every blog, every podcast, and I've never given a prediction. I'm not going to give one now. I will talk about behavioural indicators because that's people. Property is simply the thing that we're buying. It's the people that are buying it. And at the moment, I know that there is a bit of a slowdown in things in Sydney. Talking to Veronica today, so in her buyer's agency Good Deeds, she was saying there's a bit of a slowdown, not in prices. Prices aren't dropping, but the rate of growth, the astronomical rate of growth has just steadied it's the growth, how quickly it's growing has slowed down slightly because there are more properties on the market at the moment. And maybe just a slight decrease in the number of people. So people are going, I just want to go to the beach. Just get me out of my house. I want to live just for now. So I think that's a blip from what she can tell me in their market. In Brisbane, we are still having population pressure coming into Brisbane and into Queensland, and we're not seeing any slowdown in that. And soon the borders will open. And I know there are a lot of people sitting there coming up, and what that will do. One thing we haven't talked about, and I'm about to jump on the bandwagon with it quite vocally, is we've got pressure on prices from a purchasing point of view. But what the bigger picture is that we've lost so many rental properties in the greater Brisbane area to owners taking advantage of the market and selling, or coming back from interstate or overseas and moving into their properties that were rentals, that the rental pool has decreased by about, this is anecdotal. So I've spoken to a couple of franchise CEOs and some larger agency principals, and also looking at our own rent roll. About 22% decrease is the average that I'm hearing in the number of properties that are available for rent. Now that's a massive crisis. So we're talking to a group of investors here who are looking at adding to the private rental pool. But at the moment, we've had quite an exodus of properties from the private rental pool, and that's putting upward pressure on rent prices. And we're seeing a huge number of people competing for a small number of rental properties that are available, and that's pushing prices up. So 12, 13 applications on properties where it might normally get 1 or 2 applications. So I think
the thing that I want to kind of impress is, yes, has been a hot market, and it may continue, it may not, who knows for how long. Is that asset selection, I would say, is still absolutely vital.
Absolutely.
Anybody wants this, because
don't compromise on it.
Yeah, because otherwise you sort of put yourself in a position where you may still see growth, but the growth you're sort of seeing as the compound if you're holding property for 5, 10, 15 years. And even the question there was, how long should somebody sort of plan and all that sort of thing? And that's a hard question to ask. And I kind of would throw out a figure and say 10. I like to plan for at least 5 years, and after that we'll sort of see how we go. That's my answer. A question I was interested to know, and there's been some really good ones, and the thing is, how many different data metrics do you actually look at?
So there's two different parts to that. So from a top-down approach, when you're looking at the areas to buy, we've been working with Kent Lardner, who I know you guys know really well and have a great deal of respect for. He is the data geek when it comes to property, as far as I'm concerned. I've seen some incredible data that he's pulling together from a variety of sources. And you can probably imagine, when you're looking at a top-down approach, you're pulling things from ABS and median prices and days on market and vendor discounting, and all these sorts of metrics from a top-down approach. A lot of socioeconomic data, Cepha scores. If you don't know what they are, do yourself a favour and find out. So that's the advantage, disadvantage scores for different regions and also suburbs. There's some really, really interesting data there. In and of themselves, they're not helpful, but when you start layering them and putting them on top of each other and forming a really big picture, and this is what Kent Lardner does exceptionally well, is you start to get a really clear picture of areas that you should be focusing on. And what we talk to people about is that's part of the process, but then you've got to start sort of drilling down from there, because you have to layer on what you can afford and work out, of those areas that might have some really good metrics, what area can I actually afford to buy in? So that decreases the number of suburbs that you can be looking at in Britain. So you're actually, each layer actually brings you down closer to a smaller number of potential areas to look at. And then once you've sort of brought that down to a manageable number, it's actually physically getting your feet on the ground, understanding the demographics, who lives there, what are the shopping centres like, what are the commutes like, what are the, that on the ground local knowledge. You just cannot beat that. I know in Brisbane which suburbs have low-lying areas, but which streets actually have high sitting properties. So you can't actually even say in some areas, that suburb floods. Well, yeah, there are places that flood in that suburb. There are places that don't. But then there's really unique things about topography of areas that you need to overlay as well. So you can do a flood map, but if you don't understand the topography of the area, so there's another layer to actually look at to say, well, that's actually really hilly. So you need to be careful that you're not drawing conclusions around that street or that area based on one map that might not necessarily ring true. So I guess, Jeff, there's no answer to that, because it is actually a process that you actually work through the different layers as you move closer and closer to narrowing down areas.
It's really hard to organize yourself, you know what I mean? Like, because I've gone through a lot of data, and it's like, well, what is the value of a CFA? What is the value of a vacancy rate? What is the value of a days on market? And how do you actually attribute those different metrics to each other and allocate them? Because right now you look at vacancy rates, everywhere has the lowest vacancy rate ever. So you're like, oh, great. Okay, now what?
Excellent. Yeah. Do I buy in that area because it has, high rental demand? No, you don't. But
or it's not the only reason.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah.
They're not all
so there's so many other, so many other things to take into account and to layer on. And I guess that's that's one of the things that we've worked with you guys on doing is how do we actually teach people to go bottom up? Not really, bottom up's a little bit more clear and easy to work with. Top down is a massive process to go through. And we've pulled together, after lots of discussions with you guys, an actual process that people can implement to work out where to buy. And I think it's one of the most powerful tools that we've actually pulled together. And we've pulled data from Kent Lardner and some of his processes. We've using this as part of the First Home Buyer Guide course. So it's step 3 in the course. It's a small part of the course, but a really, really good one to do. And we're running a tutorial off the back of these conversations that we're having to actually teach people how to do this layering, how to go from a top-down approach and actually work out which suburbs to buy in once they've done their what am I about? What do I need? What am I borrowing capacity? What can I spend? What's my cash flow position? All those sorts of things. They can layer these things together with the tools and actually narrow down a number of suburbs. Now, this is not about asset selection. That is a completely different process. This is simply about identifying the areas that will suit their goals, fit within their price range, because price range is a big one. You might have a $400,000 budget, you might have an $800,000 budget. So you're looking at different areas. A median house price, Jeff, you love that, comes into that discussion. That's one of those layers that eliminates some and brings some in.
Segmentation. Is it price segmentation of what's actually selling? It might be, the beach side might be selling for $2 million, and then the other side of the tracks might be selling for $500,000, and then the median price is all of a sudden $1 million. It's like, oh, that's not the real price of this place.
And that's that local knowledge, Joe, and you would know this from some of your purchasing journeys, is if you don't know the little localities within a suburb, you might actually buy at the wrong price point within a suburb. And that's one of those really important sort of more micro level things that people have to be aware of. And one of the layers to, okay, well, this suburb might be good, but which pocket in this suburb is actually going to be the right one? Because if you're buying the wrong pocket, there's in Kedron on the north side of Brisbane, there's 5 pockets, which vary vastly different pricing for very, very clear reasons.
Cargo pants. Jesus.
Well done. Good analogy. Like it. Here's a clothesman.
Okay, cool.
Or you wish you were in the army. So the idea is there is no single answer to the question. And if you keep asking people, you'll get 1,000 different answers, because in most cases people have their own agenda, and they're either trying to push the agenda to support something that they've done or something that they want to do. And that's not about you as an individual. It's got to be about you first, and then working out where. And a systematic and methodical process of going through that and making sure that fits with your goals is what we want to teach people to do, because you can do this for yourself. You don't need to ask someone else how to, where to buy. You can actually come to this conclusion yourself.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what our journey here has been by actually creating this group. And this is one of the big things, is because Jeff and I have spent probably collectively, I don't know about you, Jeff.
Hundreds of thousands of hours, Joe. I mean, I haven't been
100,000 hours, but a bucket load of money as well. And one of the challenges I had was like, it's a spruiker course here that I get some of my information, where I take the nugget and avoid the spruiking, and then a course here and a course here and a course here. And it's very difficult to have a centralized location. And it's good. It's good when you've got something like that. But I don't know if we even told you this, Meighan, but we were actually, Jeff and I were in the process of needing to answer the exact same question with this group day in and day out. Where do I buy? What do I buy? Where do I buy? And we're like, no, stop. Like, you'll see Jeff's, just go to Jeff's posts and you'll just see him. No, stop. Before you do that, you've got all of this. These are the steps you need to make.
Yep.
So Jeff and I even started.
Yeah.
Step back. Jeff and I even started creating a course, because we're like, well, screw it. If nobody else is going to do this for us and it's not out there in the market, why don't we go out there and create it? And then we had Veronica on, and then we started. We've got some material there, and it was really awesome. And we've come up with some great processes and systems, and we put it down to paper, and it's awesome. But then we chatted to Veronica and had her on, and she brought up this conversation about you guys having this course, and we're like, well, what's the answer? What's the question that you're answering with this course? And it's where to buy. And then you ran us through it, and it blew our minds. So what we've gone and done, and I think we've kind of hinted at this a little bit throughout, sprinkled
it's a big
throughout.
Announcement. No, you got to do a drum roll. Where's the drum roll? I thought we were going to get the questions. And,
you guys are so much better at the sales process than I am. I just want to teach people. You sell. I'll teach.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff.
I just show up every week.
Yeah, exactly. I just show up, have a beer. It's an excuse to have a beer in public. It feels like we're at the pub. I don't even know where I was. But anyway, look, we're going to create a course, and then we spoke to you guys, and you guys already created a course. And we're like, well, that saves us having to do all of that. So we're not someone we have a large group, right? We have 12,000 people, 11,000 people, and people are always reaching out to
people, like passionate, interested, really amazing questions that come through on the Facebook group. It's really interesting to watch some of the insights that people have.
Yeah, it's awesome. But then we also got bitten, at the beginning. There's spruikers out there. So we're getting costed. People come to us all the time. We're like, hey, I want to promote my business. When I look at their business, and we're like, hell no. There's not a chance you're going on our session. And we find it actually challenging with the sponsors and the people that we promote. So this is why it's awesome to present our little collaboration on this course that that you guys have foundationally created, that's called the Where to Buy workshop. So can you tell us about this?
Investor special. Yeah. Because we do one for first-time buyers. We've been running that for some time now. But the collaborate, what we're doing with you is actually just targeting this to investors. So we're not talking about emotional needs. We're not talking about the need for housing. We're actually talking about it from an investment point of view, but also with the keeping the fundamentals of choosing an investment grade property in mind. This is not the actual asset selection part. It's the big part of the lead up of where. So it's very much about talking about you, and we talked it starts with you. It actually starts with where you are in your life stage and your investment goals and the investment type, and that will inform the kind of investment that's right for you. But then going into the money side of things, what do you ask the mortgage broker? What do you need to think about? What are the sorts of things now and into the future that you need to be talking about? How do you question your mortgage broker properly to know if they're actually going to do the right thing for you? Purchasing costs and income and running costs, and most importantly, cash flow. And I'm not talking about positive cash flow. It's not about finding a positive cash flow property. This is actually about understanding your own cash flow, things that are coming in, things that are going out. We talk about capital growth principles, because capital growth does matter, and I can't harp on about that enough. What are the core drivers of sustainable capital growth? Not lumpy capital growth, but sustainable long-term capital growth. Because property is, Jeff, you talk about 5 years. We talk about long-term being 8 to 10 years, and the ability to hold a property through a difficult time. So if there's an X factor event, not having to sell a property at a certain time, but being able to ride out an X factor event if you have to. So the core drivers of sustainable growth, what are they, and how do you work out whether an area has them, and how to identify them in areas and to take advantage of them? And that's really, really fundamentally important to understand. And then the really sort of rich, meaty bit is the data and the research, the fundamentals. So where to get the data, what data is important, what to ignore. It's really important to ignore some data. Pop that in, in the file it for later kind of, and throw it in the bin category. How to sort through the data, what are the risks and what are some of the warning signs to look out for. So this is really, really heavy, meaty stuff, but it is such a good process to understand, because you start going, all right, well, when you see something reported in the newspaper or online, sorry, no one reads the newspaper. God, show my age again, not 50 yet. But when you read something or you see something online or something is reported, if you can dig in under the headline, sometimes there's a lot more underneath the headline that is more valuable. But there's some things that you just need to say, not important, put it to the side. I've got better data. So knowing what's important and what's not important, what are the risks, what are the warning signs, what to look out for, and then that local knowledge aspect. So how to assess an area like a local, what core team members you need to grow a portfolio, depending on what your goals are. And then we do a brief outline of the next steps to actually work out how to select the asset. So the asset selection is a different process, but this is very much that top down, how to work out where to buy.
Yeah. It's the foundational stuff, and it's one of those things that I think that so this course that we're talking about, this was actually a workshop. It was a workshop course. Is going to be so it's a 2-hour live session with Meighan and Veronica next week at a time. What time is it?
8 p.m.
Okay, so it's next Wednesday night from 7 till 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. I have to remember that because I'm not in daylight time.
So New South Wales time.
But New South Wales and Victoria can tune in at 7. Everywhere else 6 or earlier. It's going to be. You've got a link there, and if you can pop up,
we've got a link. Now, one thing I wanted to mention
for the last 5 minutes. So I've just been like, okay, let's get the. And I want to get into answering the questions as well, because that's I do this. So
we'll get to the questions, but one thing I wanted to mention is that with this kind of education, this kind of the pricing around it, like I kind of expected you guys to come to me and be like, oh, it's one of these courses where we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on our education, so to get this kind of foundational knowledge, and you guys are only charging the group $99.
$99, so, for the workshop.
That is what we're talking about here. Go to you can go to a buyer's agent and spend $12,000. You can go and spend crazy money on these reports. But $99.
I think that's the thing. Like, you can buy some reports, but what do you do with the information? How do you actually dig in underneath it and work out the methodology that arrived at these recommendations? And I think that's the thing that we want to teach people is don't just take things at face value. Actually work it out for yourself. And then when you're reading things, you've actually got you start to know what you didn't know to be able to question, well, why would you recommend that when it's got such a lumpy median house price growth over a long term, and it actually hasn't done anything, and there's nothing that would tell me that it will do anything? So it's the ability to question what someone else has put out there as being truth. And I think that's really important too. That can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run.
Yeah. Perfect.
So it's a really interactive workshop. We've run it with home buyers, and we get some unbelievably good questions. Very interactive. It is run by Veronica and I ourselves, so it's coming straight from the people who have been doing it for a long time, and we've made lots of mistakes. And that's the thing that we love about actually doing these sorts of things, is we're bringing this collection of mistakes to people to stop them making the same mistakes, so that you leapfrog ahead with a great deal more knowledge and managing a lot more risks than you could do if you didn't have the information. And I think that's what I really love about what we're doing with this project with Homebuyer Academy, is it arms people and stops them making the mistakes that you and Jeff talked to us about that you made first up. And that's what your group's about too, isn't it?
100%.
It is.
I love it. Well, yeah, and also like the way that data, the way that Kent is going with how much data he's got out there, and the way that he is commoditizing the data out there, having a way to actually assess it and break it down into its pieces and understand what you're talking about is going to be gold. So anyway, I'm done selling. I want to answer some questions for the people, because we've had some bangers coming through. My favorite statement we have here is Joe Tucker, Jeff Miles will have no one tuning into their next week's live session.
Not true, because
they're going to be tuning into.
We have Steve Polizzi on next Wednesday night, so better get.
We do have the Steve Polizzi. Well, which are some of the standout questions you've seen in here, Jeff? Which ones are looking like we want to get a good answer?
Tone's asked about 15 questions, but I'll bring up this one. So he said, you mentioned you bought 720 properties in long-term capital growth. Have you done a performance report? Have you done this?
Oh.
Yeah, we did it probably about 2010. I think we did the first one. So that was about the 7-year mark. Got to understand in buyer's agency, the first year we bought about 10 properties, and by about 2007, I think maybe we were doing about 70 or 80 that year. So, the resale for most people isn't in that 7 to 10 year range. So what we're actually doing now is we're collecting the information from the last 4 years of people that have purchased through us and sold, and we're pulling all of that together. I think this period is an anomaly, so I'm not sure how I'm going to treat it, because I think it would look excessively good if we use the data from 2021. And
that's
I'd much rather be a little bit modest than blow my own trumpet about having 40% increases in 2 years, because honestly, that's what we're seeing with some properties at the moment.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, good question.
Well, there's been some great questions come through throughout this. So even Steve Polizzi, I love, like, Steve has actually asked a good question here. So he said, what do you find is the biggest hindrance to a first investor buying? Is it saving deposit, serviceability, mindset? Which of these three or four? Is it another one?
Yeah, when we originally started doing our research for Homebuyer Academy, we thought that people would want the information and the education once they've saved the deposit. But what we actually found was people were seeking the information before, as they were starting to save the deposit. And the biggest hurdle when we ran the beta group, which was we were really two-way sharing of information. They were telling us what they needed. We were sort of sharing the course, and it was building the course to be better by getting feedback from the students. It actually was around saving the deposit. So mindset was something that sometimes people told us they almost gave up and just bought anything. And there are a few students that have bought the wrong thing and wanted to go back and get the foundations right to get back out and buy the right thing. But without doubt, it's actually saving the deposit. And our biggest concern is that when people get caught in the mindset of I've got to do something to save quicker, they start looking for quick wins, which might be incentives, home buyer grants and so forth, that may lead them to buy the wrong type of asset that might set them back further than the incentive actually or the grant actually gives them. So in people's haste to get around the slowness of building a deposit in order to get into their first house, they can actually put themselves in a really poor position by choosing the wrong asset because they're being led by incentives.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It does feel good to say, okay, well, I've been saving for 2.5 years. I'm not going to save another 6 months because I can get into something. But that something is definitely not going to be something you're going to want to hold for a long period.
Yeah, and I think off the back of that, not being open to considering all sorts of options can hold people back as well. And I guess one example is LMI. So in most people's mindset, you need to avoid LMI. Like, it's almost ingrained in a lot of people that doesn't matter what you do, make sure you save your 20% plus your costs. It's actually more important to have a conversation with a broker, a really good broker who knows mortgage strategy. It's more important to have a conversation with them and say, all right, if I only have X amount in 3 months and I had to, LMI had to come into it, what would that cost? What would that look like? What, just go through the scenarios. Do a little bit of, okay, because there is a sweet spot with lenders mortgage insurance where how long it would take you to save that much more deposit is actually outweighed by paying a certain percentage of lenders mortgage insurance. And a good broker knows that sweet spot. So
like
having
88%.
Correct. Yeah. And you didn't hear it here. But a good mortgage broker will have a conversation with you.
Qualified professional will be able to tell you that.
Yes, that's right. This is general advice only. So being open to having conversations with people, not having a closed mindset, can actually open up other opportunities to you and help you maybe not save quicker, but look at other opportunities that would get you into the market quicker. But don't then sacrifice good quality asset selection by decreasing your budget to get in quicker. So it's a very fine balancing act. Be open to all sorts of different discussions with professionals who are really good in their lane.
After you kind of have discovered what you actually want yourself, I think, as well. So it's kind of a two-pronged.
It's the process.
So this is a question. This is a question I asked by Mark, and it was a bit earlier on, and he kind of. I think this is interesting. I want to hear your answer on this because I kind of the old.
Okay, I'll read it out. I'll read it out because there's very little words. If you're looking at a particular area to buy in, would you go old school and buy the worst house on the best street, or chance it by buying a much better house a few streets away from for the same price, especially with all the people these days doing renovations and knockdowns and rebuildings in several years? Your street could become more sought after when the house around the corner is just a bit better.
There's a lot there to unpack, isn't there?
Well, it's the ripple effect, I think. Like
it is. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's not necessarily just about the street. Sometimes it's the position in the street. You might be looking at the best street, but if you're buying down in the dip of the street, you may actually be better off in that surrounding street in the elevated part of the street. So it's a complex answer, isn't it? Because it's not just about what address do you have. It's not about the suburbs, it's not about the street. It's actually about what is unique about every aspect of that asset that you're looking at. So location, elevation, which way it's oriented. So is the rear facing in Queensland? The west is, your most undesirable rear, and you'll pay less for that, and people will pay you less for that. North facing rear in elevated position, people will pay a premium for. So it's actually understanding, in Melbourne, you don't want a southern rear. It's really cold and it's going to be dank and dark and not particularly pleasant. So actually there's more to just the street. And I would say don't just focus on buying in the worst house in the best street. It's actually all the other aspects that are incredibly important as well. So you've got to drill down and say, well, I know this is one of the suburbs that I want to look in. What is really sought after here? Is it some elevation, or is it being away from being shielded by the afternoon sun in Queensland? And understanding those will probably give you a better answer than just a street name.
And this is where you do this is where I do like phone calls, right? Call the property managers and ask these type of questions. They know these type of answers, and obviously be an expert. And if you're not an expert, hire a professional that is an expert. But you can call up a property manager who is an expert, who will tell you these things if you're pleasant enough to deal with and speak with, because they're going to think, okay, this person's going to buy a property, and I want to give them the best. I want them to pick the best property because I'm going to be the manager and I want to easily list this place. So I'm willing to give them more information than whereas a property real estate agent is going to try and sell you the property that they have listed rather than tell you, those type of things, those extra.
I'll give you a tiny, tiny little nugget to take away, and I hope this is valuable to you, because it's something that I find incredibly valuable. If you're talking to an agent about a property, also mention to them about another property that's listed with another agent in a different area that you're interested in, because they will give you every negative about that property and that area that you need to gather. and vice versa. So, you don't want to just know the good things. You actually want to gather the bad things as well, because I want to know where the Bikies Clubhouse is. I want to know where the Overland Flow is. I want to know all those. Where's the boarding house that has people that are out at all hours of the night? You want to know these sorts of things. So agents are very, very willing, if you can get them on the phone at the moment. They're incredibly busy. But if you can get an agent on a phone and talk to them about a property they've got listed, they'll talk about the positive attributes of that area and then ask them about a property that's outside the area to get the opposing view of that area, and then vice versa.
Hey, I just want to get your thoughts on XYZ.
I completely agree with you there as well, Meighan. It's like agents are, as long as I find I just have a conversation, a genuine conversation with them, and I just say, I'm considering a property in this area. What are your thoughts? And I haven't, not every agent's open. It depends on how busy they are, as you say. But if you just approach them, because a lot of agents are just really interested in kind of selling property and kind of thinking about it, and they've grown up in the area potentially, or they've lived in the area for X amount of years, so that if you're actually just asking them a question as another human being, rather than, and it's not to say they're not your best friends, at the same time.
Yeah. It's information gathering.
Yeah, and they'll kind of, and you can't sort of call them up and ask them 50 times, because they'll say, well, this person's a tie kicker. But you're right. We had a question here a bit earlier on, and we're kind of getting towards the end, so we've got probably a couple of questions. If people want to throw those in, we'll kind of get to as many of those as we can. But I'll throw this one up. Somebody said, what is top three? This is kind of one of those top three, but I'll ask anyway. Answer this as give as much information or as little, kind of guard as much as you want to. But what are the top three kind of areas that you look, or data and sites that you look at?
We did a podcast on this exact question. So we actually spent, about 45 minutes talking about all the different free sites where you can get information. It's episode 46. So if you Google Your First Home Buyer Guide podcast, it is on Home Buyer Academy. You can go to the podcast tab. You can watch it on YouTube.
See our podcast, I think.
Yes, yours was live today. Our chat was live today. So knock yourself out, grab a drink, have a coffee, and watch a few episodes. But episode 46 is full of free guides to free information.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, we're always
happy to share that. There's nothing that will hold back, and you like that's get out there and use it. It's just make sure you use it contextually.
Yeah, we always like to try and find all of those free resources, because there's so much value out there. There's so much that you guys can do yourself without having to pay crazy subscription fees and go like we're not going to name.
You might want to dig deeper and pay for something, but I think the foundational stuff and understanding it, you can get a lot of that for free. It's then how you pull it together and how you analyze it, and what methodology do you have for seeing what's important, what isn't important, and when you put those two things together, what's the importance of those two things when they overlay. And I think that's, there's so much free information out there. You can Google just about anything, but you've got to be careful who's promoting it, who's behind it, what's their motive, what are they trying to sell, who's getting the kickbacks behind the scenes. That's really important to understand as well. But what you do with it and what you build with it and what questions you're trying to answer, they're really important things to keep in mind when you're looking at free data.
Yeah.
Any data, paid data, every data.
Love it. Have we got any other questions? Surely.
Sorry, Jeff. I just saw you put up episode 34. I think it was 46.
Yeah, because it says here ways you can research property for free. So I just
the one.
Yep.
I could do that. I made that pop up. There you go.
Yep, I
didn't know I could do these things. Jeff gets.
You're doing that, damn it! It's like when somebody does something in the other room, and then I'm like, why is this thing turning off? Why is it not streaming anymore? It's like, and then somebody tells me later on they've been messing with me with the Wi-Fi. Like, oh, geez, no wonder.
Here's actually this was a question that I was interested in. It's talking about auctioneers, auctions. Sorry.
I was going to put it up. I thought it was a bit crazy.
No, I mean, it's not necessarily crazy, but can an auctioneer actually refuse a genuine bid like Jeff's $12,000 increment when he was going up in $50,000 increments?
I've seen it.
Yeah, if you listen really carefully, and you should at least once or twice, listen to the script and dialogue that the auctioneer shares at the start of the auction, and it very clearly says that the auctioneer may, at his or her discretion, accept a bid or not accept a bid. So it is absolutely at the auctioneer's discretion. And one of the things that they train to do and they practice is to get this run going. And if you're interrupting the run and they want the run to go in a certain way, they often have a run to figure. That is a figure that they want the property to run to before they stop making any vendor bids. Well, this is a whole other conversation, but they want the run to occur past the run to figure so that it's getting closer to the reserve. Once it's past the run to figure, there's a fair chance it's going to sell. So they absolutely, at their discretion, can refuse any bid at any time.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if you kicked off a little bit, it would still slow the. Hang on, no, I've put my bid here. Blah blah blah. Argue, and that slows the whole thing.
When they're going 100. And often I'll get a laugh and they'll say, no, Meighan, we're not going there at this point in time, but thank you for your interest. Come back with 100 if you like. So it's, It's not done with arrogance. It's often done just to interrupt the flow.
Mm. They know the trick.
I think that was a very...
Sorry.
There's a couple more that I didn't address, but if there's one last burning question somebody wants to ask, and hopefully it's, but otherwise, I'm sure Joe's got about probably 20 questions that he wants. Have you got any questions, Joe, before we're waiting for somebody to pop in?
No.
Somebody just said Jay. That's not, is that pleasing? No. No, it's not. That's not a question. But I kind of want to. I was going to ask a question. Are reliable data sources shared in the course? Probably yes.
Only, yeah. So we don't do any of the analytics ourselves. We source from Australian Bureau of Statistics. You can decide yourself whether you think that's valid or not. We do. The source, it is source data, not interpreted data.
So it's raw data, in other words, rather than kind of change data. Is that what?
Yeah, it's not someone else's interpretation of the statistics and the data. It's the same as we get a lot of information from local government area council sites. So we do a lot of look at the city plans and the overlays and so forth. That's raw data in its its most raw form. It's not an interpretation of it. It is, we pull the information together. Are you talking about the tutorial or the podcast, I wonder? Sources of data shared in the course.
Well, yeah.
Yes, they are. They're source data.
Yeah. Probably not going to say no to that question, I suppose.
I think you've answered that.
I've got probably, I know this will be the final question. How do you actually tell if a data source is reliable?
I think you've got to look at who's created it and who's put it out there. And how it was arrived at. If it's a survey of 15 people, it's probably not reliable. So you need to look at the methodology of how the data was sourced. If it's not empirically analysed, so if they haven't done the correct analysis on it, if it's simply a yes or no question, or God, I'm going to go into heavy here. It might be a Likert scale, or it might be an analysis of median house price. It might be an analysis of whatever it is. You've actually got to look at the methodology and say, is the number of, and let's talk median house price. So median house price in one suburb is not going to be reliable if there was only 3 sales. It's going to be far more reliable if there was 57 sales. So I guess you got to look at then, well, median in that case is, the midpoint of 3 sales. So what actually were you'd have to look then at the individual sales and say, well, what was the spread of the sales then? The thing that can be really misleading and hard to understand with median house prices is the spread. And you touched on it, Joe. In one part of a suburb, you might have a spread that's at the higher quartile. So they might all sit up in that $2 to $5 million range. And another part of the suburb might mostly sit in the $600 to $1.1 million range. But when you put those all across the single suburb, you get a median house price because it's just a single point of all the sales in that period of time. But it's not necessarily representative of where you're buying, if you're buying in one of those pockets or the other. So whilst that data is reliable and might come from a reliable source, how you're using it might be unreliable because you're not breaking it down far enough.
Yeah.
So you got to look at the methodology and then see how it applies to what you're trying to analyze.
And we can learn all about
statistics in psychology. It was a 10-letter swear word to me.
We can learn all about this next Wednesday at 7 p.m. on our fantastic where to buy investor workshop.
Where to buy investor workshop. It's going to be fun. We do have a good time. It is interactive and you will come away with a lot of tools.
So it's 8 p.m. New South Wales time, by the way, Joe, because it's Australian.
No,
so
it's Eastern Daylight time.
Yeah.
7 till 9.
7 to 9 New South Wales time.
Yep.
Okay. I was looking, the website says AEST, which is Australian Eastern States Standard Time. So
that is a typo.
Okay. Anyway, cool. Okay.
Well,
I shall jump on
this is why I always say New South Wales time or Queensland time, and whoever's in Queensland knows what time it is because it's Anyway, Meighan, thank you so much for taking the time.
Having me on.
We're at 2 hours. You've gone through so much value and unpacked, and we're super grateful for letting us be a part of your the collaboration in the community, and we're super pumped to see how it all goes.
I'm happy to share.
Yeah, Jeff, have you got?
Somebody was just asking a question about Kedron, but I think that's going to take us on another rabbit hole. So
that's going to take us on a rabbit hole. You go to the course and then you do your own research.
Right down there, what rabbit hole.
But no, thank you very much, and I'm excited to see where this partnership and where this journey goes. And we were only sort of, wow, that time went quick, and people are just absolutely loving it. Even Felici, who is a seasoned pro. So thanks everybody tuning in, and we've had a blast, and we'll continue to have a blast. So have a great night, everybody, and we will talk to you soon.
See you on Wednesday.
Let's go buy a property. See you guys. Bye bye.